Hi, kia ora, and welcome to Creative Connections, where we have beautiful, inspiring conversations with artists living in Aotearoa, New Zealand. I'm your host, Mandy Yarkich. Janet Mazenier is a contemporary visual artist living in Te Hau Kapua Devonport in Tāmaki Makaurau Auckland. Janet's practice engages with place, time, effect, world-bending and materiality. Her drawn paintings are characterised by texturally rich, excavated and striated surfaces that evoke ancientness, the hidden, the unseen and the ephemeral. Janet's paintings are created using oil paint mixed with beeswax, known as cold wax medium, enabling a low toxic practice that results in beautiful textural works. In this episode, we talk about how Janet got started as a full-time artist 13 years ago after a corporate career, her experience gaining a master's degree in fine art at Whitecliffe School of Art in Auckland, and going on to complete a PhD in creative practice at Elam School of Fine Art, also in Auckland, which she completed in March 2026. Janet describes the medium of cold wax, its qualities, how it's made and applied, and the effects she achieves with this medium in her paintings. We explore concepts around contextual and conceptual thinking, the ideas behind Janet's work related to heritage and place, and her involvement in 2 formative artist residencies in Ireland. We talk scale, art collectives, collaboration, working with light, time, and responding to the land. Janet teaches a number of creative classes that encompass painting, drawing, collage, and critical thinking, and is also offering one-on-one mentoring for creatives who wish to have a guiding hand to navigate your way through your creative practice. I am booked in for all of these sessions. I cannot wait. I'm in a transition period myself with my art practice, and I feel like working alongside Janet is going to really help me kind of step into that space where I am thinking a little bit more deeply about my practice. These workshops are linked in the show notes. Now sit back and enjoy episode 196 with Janet Mazenier. Kia ora, Janet.
Kia ora, Mandy.
Lovely to see you. I think we met ages ago and then we really haven't crossed paths since.
Yeah, it would be a few years now, maybe even prior to COVID, I'm not sure. But
Yeah.
I mean, we're always aware of each other, I think, through social media anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've been following your practice for ages with fascination and admiration. So can't wait to hear more about it. So you are living in Te Hau Kapua Devonport
Mm-hmm.
in Tāmaki Makaurau Auckland. What do you love about Devonport?
My brother and sister-in-law lived up here with their 3 boys, and I wanted to be closer to them. And also, my husband didn't want to live anywhere else but Te Hau Kapua Devonport because it felt to us like it was a community. And we were leaving a very close community, even though it was in a farm area. We knew all our neighbours really well. So the attraction of the place here was its proximity to Auckland, so we could travel in and out of the city easily. But we're surrounded by beaches, the most beautiful beaches, the maunga, the estuary walks. We really are spoiled. We live in paradise. So there's nothing not to love about being here.
Yeah, it's absolutely gorgeous. As I was saying to you, I lived there for quite a few years in my 20s, loved it, then got dragged to the west by my husband. And can you tell us about where you were born and what kind of childhood you had, and then also how creativity presented itself to you as a youngster?
Sure. So mum and dad immigrated from Ireland in 1964 to have me. So we say that I was made in Ireland and born in Aotearoa, New Zealand. They decided to move to Whanganui, and so I was born there and was raised there with my 3 siblings. So I have 2 brothers and a sister, and I'm the eldest. I went to school with an Irish accent. So mum and dad both immigrated from Dublin, but spent a lot of their childhoods in the counties Kerry and Kildare, which has actually informed my practice later on, which I'll talk about. So yeah, I grew up in a small town, New Zealand, provincial. I went to Sacred Heart College, but during that time, and I distinctly remember when I was 5, I had my tonsils out, and my father was a house painter and decorator, and he would find these books in the local paint shop, and he would bring them back for me, and it was like how to draw horses and how to draw people, and I just used to spend my time sketching. And I remember as a teenager too, hopping on a bike and biking out to one of the local beaches, Mofano, and just sitting there and sketching. So it was always there from that time when I was young, and I had been encouraged by my father. And I went to the local art society every week. We would go down on the bus and we would sit there with the art society members as kids from school. So that was there embedded in my memories. And I was a young mum, and my 2 girls remember me picking up sketchbooks through their childhood and just drawing. Then I met my husband later on, and it was a great way to actually bond with my stepchildren. So later on, when I did start practicing more, I was part of a gallery collective, if you like, in Powatahanui where we lived. And we would bring the kids in there and we would draw together and paint together, and sometimes on the kitchen table. So it was sort of always with me. But as I got older, it became more and more important to me to actually pick up a pencil, and really charcoal was my main media. And there was something innate in me that required me to actually draw. And painting was something that I came to later. But yeah, it had always been peppered through my life, but not full time until I actually was able to finish full time work.
Mm, that's really interesting, isn't it? And how much you can see how much all of those things like collaboration and drawing and charcoal is now sort of present in your practice.
Mm, yes, that's true. Actually, I hadn't thought about collaboration in that way, going back that far, but it was. You're right.
Mm,
Yeah.
mm,
Mm.
interesting. And just back to high school, how did you find art at high school?
Limited. I was in an all-girls Catholic school, and beyond fourth form, it wasn't an option. We were very small, so finished sort of. I remember a woman, Kath Wells, actually as an art teacher for those first 2 years of secondary school. But after that, it was very limited. So I didn't really do much art after that. I remember painting my brother holding the dog, and finding the joy of oil paints, and doing some of the local manga. Ruapehu was our manga, and nobody can find those works now. Mum can remember them, but we don't know what happened to them. So unfortunately, they're gone.
What a shame.
Mm.
Yeah.
Mm.
So you have been painting full time or practicing as a full time artist for 12 years now.
Sure. Well, I remember in 2008 going into a cafe nearby where we lived and picking up a brochure which said painting, including wine tasting in one of the local farm areas. And that was really the trigger for me to think, actually, this will be fun. I'll go and do this weekend. And I did, and I was exhausted. I was really tired because my brain was working very differently. And I was working full time. And I was on some quite big jobs, doing a lot of program management in government and telecommunications. And this was a real salve for the soul. And at that point, then I thought, oh, I want to carry on. So I bought all the equipment and I started painting with oils. And I was really mucking around and not really sure about what I was doing and why I was doing it, but I knew that I just loved the idea of painting. So I had my first solo show in 2008, and that was a bit of a mistake. It was too soon. I really wasn't grounded very much at all in what I was doing, but it did take me into thinking more about art as something that I needed in my life more. So I was a Sunday painter really from 2008 until 2012. And I got a bit burned out through work. So around 2012, I had to have some surgery and I had some recovery time. And I thought, rather than just recovering, I'll go and enroll at Whitecliffe and I'll do a couple of papers, you know. So I did that. I did a drawing and painting paper at Whitecliffe Polytech, and then I went back to work. But I met some really lovely people there who are still friends today and I'm still in contact with. And I went back to work for a short while, and then I remember one day in the car just saying to John, my husband, I can't do this anymore. I need a break. I actually haven't got it in me anymore to do this type of work. I need to just stop for a while. And I had been talking to him about a workshop in France that I wanted to do. And he said, okay, take the time out, go to France. And honestly, it was the best thing I ever did. It was plein air painting for 10 days in around Provence with a group of international artists with a wonderful teacher, Ian Roberts, who was very technical in his approach to teaching, which is actually what I needed at the time, because once you are thinking conceptually, you can't leave behind the fact that you need skills in order to execute what vision you've got. So starting with technical skills was actually the right way for me to be. But also the experience of just being in place and painting and the church bells ringing and going into some of the areas of the vineyards where you think Van Gogh might have stood here or Cézanne, you know. So after that, John joined me and we travelled around France for a while, came back to New Zealand. And then because I was not working, I really struggled. I didn't want to be working in the same way that I had been, but I struggled with identity. I'd been a mother, I'd been a stepmother, I was a partner. We were on a lifestyle block. We had some real issues there with, we had a leaky house, so we had to rebuild that from scratch. And I thought, well, I'm just going to do the 100-day project. And I'm going to carry on the learning from what I had learned in France. So I did 100 days worth of painting. And that kind of really took me into the place of needing to paint every day. And when you get to that point, you know you're embedded, it's embedded in you to want to create every day.
Yeah. And I feel like when you've got a bit of a project like that, or some sort of deadline, or some sort of context that you're working within, it really helps to be disciplined enough to start doing that. And then after a while, it just becomes sort of second nature. That's when you start really learning about yourself as a person and as an artist.
It's absolutely right. And you start searching for what is it that I'm painting and why am I painting it? And for me, it was a very frustrating time because I hadn't done that academic research, which was the thing that really allowed me to think more conceptually and contextually. But what it did do was got me in that frame of mind and way of being. I always felt that there was something in the land that was telling us we shouldn't be there. And we overlooked a place called Battle Hill in Powatahanui, and there was a lot of bloodshed there, but not very much signage about the history of the area. It was just seen as a place where people went and had picnics. So the whole of the inlet, the Powatahanui Inlet, has a huge amount of history. And so by painting there, I was starting to investigate the history of the place and the places that I was standing, but not really doing too much investigation at that point.
What was your work like at that time?
It was pretty bad.
Probably wasn't bad. I'm sure it wasn't.
Dreadful.
And was it landscape based, or was it quite abstract?
Yeah, it was a mix. It was some internal paintings of our house, of the ironing board, of the couches, of the the lampshades, or I was outside and I was painting place, but it was very much in that context of representational style. I hadn't thought about being abstract at that point beyond just playing around with kind of colour field abstraction, although I couldn't have even named it for that at the time, but I knew that the media needed to speak differently for me, but I couldn't figure that out. So I kept in touch with my whiteaia students, and one of them, Sam, and I decided we would do the Whitecliffe Advanced diploma, which then took us into travelling to Auckland, Tāmaki Makaurau 4 times during the advanced diploma year, meeting up with other people who were doing it part-time. So that was really influential in me then having to think more deeply about what I was doing and realising I actually didn't have enough depth of thinking. So I got to the end of that advanced diploma year and decided to actually do the final year, which was then the BFA year. And that required a thesis, small, I think 8,000 word thesis. But in writing that thesis, then what it did was made me question the underpinnings of what I was doing. But also because I'd missed the first 2 years of an arts degree, it actually made me realise I didn't have enough grounding.
What was your thesis about?
Oh, it was about place, but it was about palimpsests and palimpsest thinking, which of course has influenced my later practice when it did evolve and develop. But the covering up and the uncovering was always part of what I was doing. And I couldn't have named it for that at the time, but I do remember a moment where Sam said to me, "Oh, why are you bringing these paintings up to Whitecliffe? Why aren't you taking that one?" And I couldn't have told you why or why not, but that one, the one that she pointed out, became the linchpin or the launching point really for what came later. And it was very gestural and it was very earth coloured. It was very dense. So anyway, that's where I got to with the BFA. And I finished that BFA with that sense that, yeah, it was good to get the degree, but I hadn't finished the learning. So I took a year off, and in that time I thought I really want to go and do my master's because I felt like I didn't want the degree, the master's degree for the degree itself. I just wanted to continue the learning. And yes, I could have done that on my own, but I knew that I needed guidance.
When you say guidance, do you mean you felt like you needed more technical skill, or what were you looking for in that guidance?
No, I was actually looking for someone to ask questions of me that I then had to respond to. So I was really lucky to be placed in master's group with Alan Smith, with I think there was about 13 of us, who most of whom eventually then became the Mother group, the collective. So yeah, there was a bit of a story in behind that too. I started in 2017, and then my brother David got cancer, so I put my study on hold so I could actually support the family. And he survived that, thankfully. He's become a real advocate for cancer research now. But that was a tough time, and it was pretty difficult dealing with that situation because it was a terminal diagnosis at that point. But he's recovered thanks to the help of CAR T therapy. But I
Amazing.
kept trying to paint through that time as well, just for my own sake. Anyway, I re-enrolled or rejoined my master's group, and that's actually when I met the Mother group. So the previous group, some people had carried on. Became a bit more of a collation of people who had actually sort of gone through the program, and it was part-time, so we had lots of time together. And that was really a lovely, lovely time at Elam because of the group dynamic, but also I remember being in sessions with Alan, who was incredibly theoretical and philosophical, and who was asking questions of us as a group to go away and research and find out answers and how that related to our practices, but also the more broader art world itself. And that's exactly what I needed. I needed that lift into that space of thinking. I didn't know
Mm.
how to think, made me realize.
Yeah. But it's interesting, isn't it, that you felt the need to learn how to think. Like what was it in you that made you hungry for that kind of part of your process?
Mm, I guess it was a recognition that I didn't know what I didn't know, um, which would have made it hard for me not to have been in academia because I wouldn't have known where to go and start further searching. Maybe over time I might have developed the discipline for that side of the practice, but it was all about the painting for me and the drawing. And I think that if I hadn't challenged myself with masters, I wouldn't have done it. So, yeah, there was a hunger there, but there was also in me a recognition that when you work in the corporate world, you are dealing with things, even though I was dealing in a lot of strategic programs and I was dealing a lot with communities and there was a lot of collaboration and program management in that, you don't scratch the surface of philosophy particularly. And there was a whole body of knowledge in the world that I actually really didn't know existed. And I'd only just scratched that surface with my bachelor's. So yeah, I needed to be forced into it in a way. And that's possibly how I have realized that I've got through the academic work, is that my personal challenge is to actually put myself in a position where I'm uncomfortable. And that's in practice, but also in the writing. And the writing for me was just so hard. And I knew I wouldn't do it unless I was pushed to do it.
Yeah. And the writing is in response to the reading
Yes,
and sort of collating your thoughts.
yes, yeah, very much so. So, yeah, so Alan retired, and that was a real loss, but not so much. I mean, I stay in touch with him, but then I was actually placed in under the stewardship of Sean Kerr, Dr. Sean Kerr, and for that final year of writing, of which I think was another sort of 9,000 word thesis, which doesn't sound much, but you have to condense all this research you've done into only 9,000 words. And I remember going through that year and things started to coalesce. I was still very frustrated at the beginning of the year in that I couldn't quite contextualize what I was doing. I knew I had heaps of interests, and Alan would always say, Janet, you've got too many ideas. You just got to pull them in. Too many ways of thinking and ideas. And I'd gone from painting hyper-realistic buildings of empty corporate spaces at the end of my BFA, which again was speaking to similar ideas to what I've always evolved through the practice, just articulating them in a different way. And I'd moved into abstraction by this point. And really quite fundamental to the change in my thinking and my practice for that final year of masters was walking with our little old Labrador Bess. And she was a tiny, tiny little Labrador, and she outlived our border collie, and we never expected that. She was nearly 15 when she died. But in that final year of her life, which actually happened to be the final year of my masters, we were able to walk less and less as she got more and more arthritic, and in the end her back legs went on her. But I remember one day just standing at the end of the drive watching her as she sniffed the ground, and I could see what she was showing me was the compositions in the ground, in the earth, and the way that pebbles lay in the cracks in the asphalt and the concrete. And there in front of me was the composition that was waiting to be painted. And that was a
Wow.
fundamental change in how I thought about my work.
That is incredible. What a beautiful story. And that sort of shift into abstraction, how do you think that happened?
So at the same time, I had discovered the medium of cold wax. So again, I don't know how much time we've got, but this is actually a really nice story too about serendipity. And we had been to Hobart on a holiday just before I started my master's, so 2016. And I had seen this painting in this gallery and it said cold wax medium. And I thought, wow, I love the look of that. Looked it up. And the absolute doyen of women, Rebecca Kroll, who had developed a whole lot of YouTube information about how to use the medium, was coming to New Zealand to teach. And she was doing that with a guy called Jerry McLaughlin. And they were coming in 3 months' time, right at the start of my master's thesis. So I thought, I'll enroll in those. So in that workshop, which was 5 days, horrendously expensive. But I loved it so much, and I loved the way that Rebecca taught, which was very generous in sharing her knowledge, but also very collaborative. And Jerry too, that I repeated the workshop while they were here in New Zealand. And of course, they haven't been here since, and they're unlikely to. So I had that opportunity to learn from people who really, really knew what they were doing. And in fact, not long after that, they published their book, which is the Bible for cold wax medium. So I had that resource, and I worked with it for a good year and a half before I decided to teach it, because there wasn't really anyone teaching cold wax medium in New Zealand. And I had had a training background. I had taught, I had been teaching people negotiation, sales skills, presentation skills in the past. So I was able to look at how to structure a workshop and also then look at how I used it in my practice. So it wasn't doing exactly what Rebecca had done, but I had that resource in the background with my own way of making work. And so from that point, I started teaching, which also then reinforced my own learning because the
Mm.
more you teach, the more you learn, and the
Yeah,
more you
totally.
actually ask questions that you have to answer.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, and why do you think it was that you were so drawn to cold wax?
So the qualities of it are immense. It has like infinite potentiality in terms of what you can do with it. It has qualities of translucency and transparency, of layering, of being touch dry overnight that allows you to actually work with it the next day with methods of sgraffito, excavation. You can actually keep layering up. And of course, this is when I started to realize that earlier in my life, when I was actually covering over and uncovering, this medium allowed me to do that in a really conscious way, that there are no mistakes with it. So if you make a mistake, it is not one. It is just adding to the history of what's in the layers. And so you go over the top. And then I started to discover that what I had done early in the practice with cold wax medium, I could actually bring out of the drawer, 2 or 3 years later and carry on working with it. So that there is no waste with this medium either. Um, it doesn't use acrylics, so there are no plastics used with it, and it's the most low toxic way of painting that I can find. It acts as a carrier for other media, for dry pigments. It actually speaks to these earthy processes of layering, of volcanics, of tectonics, of movement, of the things that actually make up the world in which we live that we actually often don't see unless we're really consciously looking for. So it speaks really highly conceptually to what I was looking for in my practice as well.
I can totally see that. Yeah, I just love the process. The more I learn about it, I just said to you earlier, I need to do one of your workshops because I really feel like that's what I need in my practice.
You'll be
Yeah,
very welcome.
thank you. I can't wait. So the cold wax that is mixed, though it's beeswax, isn't it? Is mixed
Mm.
with oil paint.
Yes, so part of the process of learning to work with cold wax medium is you can buy a commercial product, a very good commercial product, which is Gamblin's cold wax medium. There are others, but Gamblin's is the most common here in Aotearoa. The Gamblin make that with theirs with a resin, odorless mineral spirits, and lightly bleached beeswax. I didn't like the idea of working with a bleached beeswax, so I have discovered through the cold wax medium book a number of recipes that allowed me to experiment making my own. So I access my own beeswax cappings, which are the scrapings off the hive, and I mix with castor wax and odorless mineral solvents to make my own mediums. So that has become a really important fundamental part of my practice, which is taking something which is the gift of the bees and bringing that into filtering in the sunshine, creating filtered beeswax that then I merge with the castor wax and odorless mineral solvent. And within half an hour is a paste that's ready to use. That gets mixed with oil paint, or it can be mixed with charcoal or dry media, such as graphite, oxides, pigments, if you want to do that. And then you apply that using scrapers and rollers, the Americans call brayers. So different ways of applying. That application process takes you away from being there with a brush, closing in on yourself. You open yourself up gesturally by using these different tools. And I don't actually like cleaning brushes either. So I like the application with other tools. So the tools become a big part of how you think about how your practice is working as well. I could go on, I could have written an entire thesis just on
Yeah.
application and tools. But
I actually feel like I feel like you need to write a book or do, around that. And also, wouldn't it be amazing to actually produce your beeswax for sale for other artists to use?
I did. I tried that. So what happens with making your own is that it's not always guaranteed in terms of how the end product's coming out. I love little gritty bits left in the wax because there's a textural component to what I do that enhances for me the works. Some people, though, didn't like the gritty bits. So there was no guarantee that I would get a smooth paste or a slightly gritty paste because time and temperature really influence even the way that you stir the wax when you're actually finishing it after it's been in heat. Makes a difference to it. And so in the end, I thought, no, I can't guarantee anything here. I'll continue to make my own, but I'll share my knowledge. And so as part
Mm.
of the workshops, I actually make the medium with people so they can see how to make it. It's very easy.
Mm.
And
Amazing.
they can then go away and source their own products and make their own wax, and then, live with the consequences of it.
Yeah, exactly.
If they
Sorry.
want really, really translucent, transparent works, then the Gamblin product or the Langridge product, they're really beautiful products that actually allow for that without any of that texture entering the waxy surface.
Mm. And you obviously like the texture and the ability to sort of layer and dig in and excavate, as you say,
Mm,
and sort of scratch in and all of
mm,
those amazing mark making techniques.
mm.
Do you also have oil paint kind of just by itself? And
No.
so it's all always mixed.
Yes, I always, you can start with a surface that's oil paint underneath as long as it's fully dry, but oil paint on its own dries very differently and over a longer period of time than when mixed with the cold wax. So the wax actually, with the solvent in it, is quite a fast drying agent, which actually makes for those aspects like being touch dry overnight.
Mm.
But if you were to mix layers of oil paint, getting a bit technical here, but if you use a cadmium, for example, that might take months and months to dry anyway, just being a cadmium pigment. But when you're actually mixing it with wax as a binder, you don't have to worry about that. So the
Oh,
wax through the layers then acts as the drying agent over time.
okay. That's
Mm.
fascinating, isn't it?
Mm.
Yeah.
It's hard not to get technical with it because it offers so many things technically to your practice, but also then conceptually it offers so much as well in terms of how it just speaks to, you know, ecologies and how you think about when you're really using your media, what's the provenance of that media? As I say, I've had, I often get bees come in when I'm making the medium, but also when I'm using it in the studio. And I've had a couple of swarms here in my home studio. Our neighbours have got bees, and that's quite scary. When a swarm is coming at you, we have to close the doors and windows pretty quickly and get hold of the beekeeper to remove the new hive. And my studio mate in my other studio often gets visited by bees as well as they come in through the open windows,
Really?
looking in there.
Yeah, I love it. I saw a photo on Instagram of a bee just hanging out on one of your paintings. I love
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
Yeah.
They
And
often,
and that whole conceptual side of art, I mean, it's not something that we necessarily dive that deep into on this podcast. But how do you see that sort of conceptual thinking and how does it work in with your practice?
so I've really looked into phenomenology and Maurice Merleau-Ponty's writing. I also really um, worked a lot with Linda Lappin's writing. She's a writer who lives in Italy, but she's written a book called The Soul of Place. And that really triggered my thinking into thinking about, well, what is place? How do I experience it? The phenomenological aspect of that is the experiential side of it, but actually it's more than that. It's the sensuous side, it's the smells, it's the sounds, it's the feeling of place. And therefore, when you start thinking about the feeling of place, then it's very hard tangibly to describe what a feeling of place is. But that's where I go back to Powata Hanui, where we had a number of things go wrong on that lifestyle block, where in the end, I think that there is a history that's embedded in that soil. Potentially the bloodshed we wouldn't have known about because nothing's been documented, but that house that we lived in had a lot of bad history attached to it. So I was very glad to leave that behind. But you try and describe that verbally or even in writing, but painting can do that. Painting can express a feeling that you as an artist bring to it, but also then the effect that people take away. So I wrote a lot about effect in my thesis too, about effect theories and how we are affected. So it takes phenomenology beyond Merleau-Ponty's writing into effect and then into what is trying to describe a spirit or soul of place through painting. So how does painting express that?
Mm.
And materials, how do those materials that you use add up to that sense that you're actually bringing sense or soul of place? It's in Irish, it's anam and oit. And then how we live life, we are nested. Ontologically, we're all nested within other ontologies. So we are people who come from place. Well, I will jump to the beginning of PhD research because it goes back to why I did my master's. I knew even at the end of master's, I wasn't finished. I had developed a real love of learning that I knew that lazy old Janet, if she just in the studio, wouldn't do the work that's required to have got me to the place I'm at right now. I just wouldn't have done it. And I think that's the case with a lot of people. And this is where I'm finding this even with teaching. People love to practice, but they're starting to become more thoughtful about their practice and they actually don't know where to go with it. And it doesn't have to be academia. It can actually just be working with a mentor or someone who can actually give you some guidance. You don't have to go through the university system. But I chose to, and I looked at a project that was place-based because that's where it was all starting from, was what is this place I stand on? Who am I in this place called Te Hau Kapua Devonport in Tāmaki Makaurau? What is my heritage? Oh my goodness, it's Irish, and I know nothing about it. And my parents have raised me with stories of home. They still call Ireland home, and my home is here. So, what does that mean to me as a hybrid person living here, as a person born in Aotearoa, but with this Irish heritage? So, when I started thinking about place, I started thinking, I can't ignore that heritage side of me. I have to explore that. So my project it started off really wordy, and I can't even tell you, it was effective geographies and place based in Ireland and Aotearoa, New Zealand, and it was just really wordy, but it came back to a research question that's really quite simple, which is how can painting express a soul or spirit of place in Aotearoa, New Zealand, and in Ireland, my heritage. So you embark on a PhD journey and you think you know where you're heading, and you don't. All you've done is created a framework that allows you to start the exploration. And I have had the most incredible support from my supervisors. I would think way and beyond what I had expected. Fortnightly meetings, critiques, questions, really deep questions, taking me from being a relatively thoughtful artist to being an every word I say now, I think about in the context of the questions that I'm being asked about my practice. So that has changed my approach to my practice markedly. And it's not just why are you using that colour red, but how does that fit in within the context of this painting, this body of work, this practice that you hold as an artist? Where does that sit? And for me, it came back to, well, it's the volcanic core of the earth on which we stand, because I am looking at place and I'm looking at the strata of place and how that gets reflected through my practice. So all of a sudden I realize I've got red and orange in the core of everything that I do, and then I build out from that, and sometimes into quite monotonal works. So starting that, and when you do a PhD, you have to go through the approval process to start with. I was lucky I was given a doctoral scholarship, so that allowed me then to have the freedom to play with ideas of, well, what am I going to do? How am I going to put some key milestones in and around this research? And in that first year, I went to Ireland And you have to go through a gate at the end of your first year to allow you into the rest of the PhD. So it's not a given that you've just been accepted. So I went to Ireland and I met a cousin that I'd never met before, having asked her through Facebook, because we were on Facebook, do you know any local archaeologists I can talk to about place in Ireland around County Kerry, which is where my father spent his childhood? And she said, oh, I can help you out. I'm an amateur archaeologist and the woman you need can't do it right now. So I arrived, drove down to County Kerry. I was just amazed. The colours of Ireland surprised me. They weren't just the greens, they were the purples and the blues and the unbelievable stone. Like, if you've ever fell in love with stone, that was me. So I drove down and met Gail, and she locked me in a car, took time off work for a week, and took me around all of Kerry to show me and to talk to me about the places that Dad had grown up, where he went to school when he was little. I can't tell you how powerful that week was to help me understand ring forts and myths and fairy tales of place around County Kerry in Ireland. And it influenced me. I came back and I just couldn't process it. What she gave me was this most tremendous gift of the start of a burning knowledge to know more about my heritage. Anyway, I went through they call it PGR 9, which is a small investigation of where you're at. You give a presentation, you show your work, you get your feedback, and then you are either given the tick or not to continue. So I was given the tick. And through that time, I had applied for 2 residencies. And of course, you apply for residencies and you don't think you're going to get them. So you apply for more than one. Well, I got both. And so I spent the first one in a place called Kilrellig in Ballinskelligs, which is in County Kerry in winter. And it was dire. The weather was just unbelievably cold. There was something going on in the organisation of the residency where the director had left and nobody was stepping in to take over. So there was quite a distinct lack of organisation. There was no fuel for fire because the turf man who delivered the fuel was actually away at a funeral. And so I had no heating for a few days. The weather was so bad. There were 6 cottages that were all ex-famine cottages and gorgeously done 30 years earlier, but were probably needing a bit of work. So I spent most of the time in the evenings in bed, cuddled up with a duvet, ringing home to John going, I want to come home. I really don't like this. I'm freezing. And the studio space was quite small and I'd already started to work slightly bigger, and I'd go out in the car every day. But because it was winter, everything was shut. Not even a pub was open. So it was pretty lonely. And in that time, my brother had brought my mother out to Ireland for a trip. And luckily, they came to see me in the middle of that trip. And we all went to see the cousins in Tralee. And that kept me going. It was a 2-week residency. It kept me going. And I got to the end of that and I was able to come home and really process what that meant to me, because that gave me a different side of Ireland than the one I'd seen the previous year with Gail. So I came back to New Zealand for a month because I didn't quite know what to do in the month in between. And yeah, in that month, actually, I was lucky because I was given a boost of confidence. I won the Waikato Painting Award and I was able to go to that and then take off back to Ireland to go to this place called the Burren. And the second residency, you couldn't have compared the two. They were just so different. The Burren College of Art has the most incredible facilities and like anything you want. There's a library, there's cafe, there's 19 other residents in massive studio spaces. And it was, again, a hugely powerful time, not just from a painting perspective, but being around other artists and international artists, but a lot of Irish artists as well. And we became fast friends really quickly. And I laughed and I experienced joy. Irish women's humour. We had a trained Irish storyteller, Sensei, who would give us stories of legends and myths around the fire at night. Music, yeah, really talented musicians, these women. It was all women. I'm not sure why, but I felt like I'd found my tribe, and I found it at the Burren. And the Burren itself is a stony, lunar-like landscape that has the most incredible history. sad histories of the famine. Most incredible limestone that goes down in caves, hundreds and hundreds of meters deep, has Arctic flowers that are unique to the Burren. After glaciation occurred and the ice melted, these seeds of these little flowers were there. Cuckoo calling, which is a rare bird in Ireland. You can hear that often around the Burren. And the Aran Islands are just off the coast. So these again are the most incredibly beautiful, isolated places. The stone walls, I just could go on forever about the Burren. And I fell in love with that place and I felt like I'd found my place in Ireland. And while I was there, because of the size of the studio space and because the college was so well resourced, I was able to make 3-meter wide paintings on unstretched canvas and really push the medium that I was working with. And I taught a few workshops to people because they were curious about the medium while I was there. And hilarious times rolling these works to fit into a ski bag around a sewer pipe to bring them back through customs to New Zealand. I'm just laughing our heads off thinking, we're not going to go and buy art tubes, we're going to buy a sewer pipe. And that's yeah, so I arrived back in New Zealand. I was able to show my supervisors this work and they just went, wow, you've found something here now that has really resonated both from a place perspective, but also within your painting. It has just shifted it, and it did.
Yeah.
So I continued to work on that basis, and like with all the thoughts and the memories and the walking that had been done coming through me into the surfaces of the work. And the way that cold wax medium works is as you scrape in, every single mark you make changes the whole composition of the whole. So you're looking at a very, very small, tiny mark, but then when you stand back from it, you're actually seeing the whole. So at that stage, I started to think about, well, I'm going to be submitting in January 2026. I need to start thinking about where I take these works. So I had a number of exhibitions and started to really build on the idea of unstretched canvas, going large. And that then culminated in a 10-meter work called Tidewoven, which I made to connect Aotearoa, New Zealand and Ireland and Iceland, because at this stage we had formed a collective out of that first time in the Burren called Mehul. And Mehul in Irish means people who collaborate to bring in the harvest. So I sent this work over to Iceland for an exhibition that Mehul was showing in, and I did mine as my personal project. And then I went back to the Burren in 2025 and worked with the collective to create a massive work that we made, a 7-meter wide work called Fault Lines, which we'd had many Zooms over the period of time before this, with a lot of people who wanted to know exactly how this work was going to turn out. And with cold wax painting, you never know because of its unpredictability, which is also, for me, its wonderful potentiality. And so we did. We had this magical time in the Burren for the 3-week residency. And again, we laughed, we joked, we walked mountains called Mullackmore, which are ancient and historic and just unreal in their beauty, and with turlows, which are lakes that form on top of the stone, the clints and the grikes of the stone, and then drop down into the limestone below. So they're temporary lakes, depending on what the rain's doing. And for some reason, I've had really good weather while I've been in the Burren. So, I do get a kind of slightly prejudiced view of it. And we went out to Inishmaan, which is one of the Aran Islands that's the least touristy and least populous. And we spent a day out there together. So we explored places together, and then we came back in and we would work on fault lines. And while we had that 3 weeks there, knowing that we were going to be taking this work from the Burren directly to Iceland. So there were going to be 7 of us taking it over.
And you were all working on that same piece?
Yeah, yeah.
Which is pretty unique, isn't it? How did you actually, you obviously were on the land and then were sort of responding to the land through the work using cold wax medium. But how did you kind of bring it all together and make sure that all these artists with different backgrounds could produce something that felt cohesive?
It started here in Te Hau Kapua. with me deciding to bring Pounamu for the Mehel Collective. My friend Te Hau Walker is the cultural advisor for the community here. And so I asked her if we could do a blessing of the Pounamu. And we did. And John came too, and another friend. And we went to Naranek, and she did the karakia. And what was beautiful about that was Te Rahia's husband, Nahi, was the advisor to the Navy, cultural advisor to the Navy, and he was actually in Gallipoli while we were doing this blessing. And she was on the phone to Nahiwi, and he was giving her guidance to give the blessing for the Pounamu. So we dipped the Pounamu in the water, and then we let it dry on the rocks. And then part of that ritual is to come back and have kai and talk with each other and get to know each other, which we did that afternoon. It was a really special, special day. So that Pounamu I took with me. And I said to them, I'm happy to lead this collaboration. I won't be really bossy, but there will be some things I will ask you to do. One of which I said, I want to bathe the canvas in the water off the coast of the Burren. And honestly, that just was met with, you're what? And I knew, because cold wax is wax, it's impermeable. So I said to them, what I want us to do is to gesso one side, the other side will be already waterproofed because it'll come primed. And then we're going to take this canvas down and we're going to bathe it in the water off the coast. Well, it was the most fabulous thing to do. We've got wonderful photos of this canvas blowing through like a sail, and then it became a curragh, which is the Irish boats, and we bathed it in the water and we sat it in the rocks. And one of the artists here is a filmmaker, and she said, I'm going to make a film of this, which we have got, which I have to show somewhere at some stage. And we laid the canvas out, and it had caught the sand in its crevices, and it was almost like it had actually made itself into a painting. And we could have left it at that. It was beautiful. Anyway, we took the painting back, and we had to seal the sand that we wanted into the surface of the canvas. And at this point, everyone's going, this is just crazy, you know. But the college has got a fire pit as well. And so there was a real collective endeavour to collect the charcoal from the fire. In Ireland, they have ash dieback, well, like we have kauri dieback, and the college had to take down a whole lot of ash trees, and so they were using that as the firewood. So we turned that charcoal into actual charcoal and ink and paint, and we drew with it, and I got people just using those materials on the top of the canvas, and we weren't planning anything. We were just, I said, just draw, you know, and we're just going to, because I knew through the processes of layering that it didn't matter what we did until we got to the end, near resolution. So we had the sand, we fixed the sand, we dried the canvas, we brought it inside, and then we had a meeting, and I just said, look, if there's going to be any disagreements, we need to talk it out, because I'm not going to be bossy about this. The end result is going to be something that none of us know what this is going to look like, but we're just going to all make this work together. And literally, we had no issues at all. None at all. Maybe it was the friendship that we'd already formed. The college was incredibly supportive of us. They were giving us as much space as we needed. They would come in and they would help us move the work around. They had technicians. And really, it was just magical. I don't know, just worked, you know.
And with the mark making, were people kind of responding to the other marks that people had made and that kind of thing,
Yeah.
or did you kind of have your own areas, or how did it work?
No, it was a free for all, and it was just go for it, you know.
Yeah,
And
I
every
love that.
time somebody went for it, then that end of that day, we would put a coat of either clear wax over the top to hold it, or we would put some colour in. It was a very monotonal painting because we were speaking to what we imagined Iceland might look like, and this work was being made in the Burren, responding to the Burren, but knowing that it was travelling to Iceland. It became almost like a person, really. We were sort of creating this being, you know, that was holding
Yeah,
spirit. Yeah.
yeah, I can see that.
Getting to the end was you need to kind of allow for drying time, obviously, before you take a work and roll it. So we were getting to its point of tolerance. And I remember on the final day, I had said to people, right, we need to leave her now because she needs to really cure before we can actually travel with her. And one of the wonderful women there came in with this humongous piece of charcoal because they'd been used to just coming in and drawing and stitching and tufting and burning and cutting. And she came in and I went, no. She was like, oh, no more. And that was the only time I had to say no. And she sort of backed off and I was like, look, we're just, we're curing at the moment. So, that finished that work. And in that time, we still had about a week to go. So Anne and I actually had the cut-off piece. So Anne Mulcrone, who's another artist there, very, very dear friend of mine. So we decided we'd make another work. And that happened very quickly because we had all the materials there. We actually just worked away together on it. And we thought we might sneak this one into the exhibition as well. Travelling with these large works to Iceland was going to be quite challenging because we were meeting my husband and we were going to be driving around Iceland in a car for 9 days. So in the end, we didn't roll the works, we folded them and we folded them into suitcases and then they just came as luggage. And one of the works, Sulphra, we named after visiting the Thingvellir Park because Anne and I couldn't agree the name in Ireland. And then we left Sulphra and went, that's the name of the work. So Sulphra came with us. Fault Lines was hung. So Fault Lines was the original big 7-metre work. And there were some challenges in that. We hadn't realised that the walls within the gallery space were concrete. So luckily we had someone with us, one of the partners, who actually could use a concrete drill because there's no way I could. So we hung fault lines, and these are the sorts of challenges you have to think through, but you measure space, you look where windows are, and then you don't realise you're going to need a concrete drill, and you're in the middle of Seyðisfjörður on the east coast of Iceland with no hardware shop. Anyway, we managed that one, and then we hung Sulphra unknowingly into another artist's space. It wasn't clear that it was another artist's space in this. And the next morning we went in and our work had been shifted. So Sulphra had been shifted and Sulphra had that volcanic core to her. And the curator, Carl, had actually hung the work over the window and all of a sudden this work just lit up and it glowed from beneath. And it's changed my practice fundamentally. I now work with light as well.
Really?
I've got new works coming out soon that are working with light and behind them. And yeah, that was just the most amazing experience being in Seyðisfjörður. It was part of the world building exhibition by Sluice. Great bunch of artists from all over the world, exploratory, some really amazing practices, some lovely projects of which we're part of now going forward. Came back and then it was, okay, now I've got to write my thesis.
Wow. And what an incredible amount of fuel and sort of material to then sort of translate into your thesis.
Yeah.
Wow. And just going back to Iceland, I mean, exploring some of the photos that you've shared on Instagram, it's just like the makeup of the landforms and the marks in the land. I can really see the connection with your work, and it must have been such a powerful experience to come to a land like that and then connect it to your practice.
Oh, look, Anne and I still, we keep stay in touch regularly because it was Anne and I and John in the car for 9 days, which was, that was going to be a test as well, but it was the most, again, magical time. But Iceland is just so raw. And even though it's quite touristed, because of the time of the year we were there was in May, it wasn't the high season. So we were able to walk up to glaciers and touch them and hear the cracking and the movement and the fractures and the fault lines all occurring and the whooshing of the water as it was melting. It was really obvious about glacial change and glacial melt. And the surprises of driving around a corner around Vic one day and all of a sudden there's icebergs in front of you and they call it Iceberg Alley, but it's got its own name, obviously. And Anne and I were saying, how often do you actually get to see an iceberg calve when you're just standing there watching this happen and tipping over? It was the most unbelievable experience. I mean, I could paint icebergs for the rest of my life, the beauty of the colours. And then just, as I say, like the stripes in the glaciers. I hadn't realised it was so much black that's in glacier, that's old ash and it's coming up from the bottom. I mean, yeah,
Amazing.
Really resonant. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow.
Mm,
What an experience. And
mm,
then taking that inspiration back to New Zealand and then connecting those ideas with our New Zealand whenua. How did
mm,
that translate?
mm. Uh, in two ways. I grieve now coming back because, as I say, I felt my tribe, but I also found like I felt my place in the Burren. And so for a month after I got back, I grieved that experience because I knew it could never happen in that way again. But also then just getting out with the dog and walking and connecting with the people here again. My beautiful friend Tere here, and just talking about place and Te Hau Kapua and looking again here. It's there's a connection for me, which means I now have two places. I have a foot in Ireland and I have a foot here. And I think forevermore, my heart's going to be in both places and it's never going to be the same.
I can imagine. And
Mm,
it must have been quite healing for you in some ways to kind of to go back to your basically your home place
mm.
and back to your heritage. Do you feel like that sort of really has influenced your work as well?
Very much so. I've met cousins I never met before, and we've had time together, and I've stayed in their houses, and so from that perspective, it's just been unreal. We're in touch now in ways that we wouldn't have if we hadn't met. How that connects to my work is often just painting, thinking about them in those places. The translation is just those memories, those collected memories, the flashes of something where I'll think about, walking in a certain place, or there'll be a conversation that might have been had, and it just standing in front of that painting it. That's the translation, really. What other people see in it, is up to them. But I hope for them to get the feeling of what I'm trying to translate into the work to come out to them.
Yeah. So tell us about your sort of final thesis, which you have submitted. So you must be feeling incredible
Well,
or
as
exhausted.
I'm a bit tired. My poor old dad's 95 now. He turned 95 a couple of weeks ago. So, and he was quite ill over Christmas. So we got the call twice to go down to actually be with him, thinking he was dying. So that was really quite influential. At the same time, I was editing my thesis to get the final, and the editing process is just nonstop. And then things corrupt. And, you just go through this churn of all of that stuff happening at the same time. So if it wasn't for my younger brother, oh my God, I wouldn't have got there. He is just incredibly, wonderfully helpful and technical. And my supervisors and, the copy editor and the designer and everyone all contributed to me getting that thesis done in time. The relief was huge. But now I'm kind of looking to 2 weeks' time, I install, and I have created a work over 15 months called Ephemeral Song, which speaks to my time in Ireland, particularly those nights in Kilrellig and Ballinskelligs, which when the wind died, I heard this organ-like sound coming across the water. I don't know what it was, and I can't find it. Nobody I know can find what this song was. It wasn't a boat horn, or it wasn't anything I can put a name to. So it's one of the first works I've ever titled in advance of painting, and it's 22 meters long.
Wow.
So I work on it in my other studio. I finished it now because of the space that I've needed to paint it. But I technically have had to roll it over the top of a panel and roll it as I'm making it. So I haven't seen the whole work, and I won't see it until it's actually installed into the gallery space at AUT in, on the 23rd of March. And then my exhibition's on the 26th. Then I also meet with the examiners that day as well. So
Wow.
until that day, I haven't seen it.
Oh my God, that's such an interesting way to work.
Mm,
And
yeah.
why 22 meters?
So it started that I'd bought a roll some years ago and I was scared of this roll. But as my work got bigger and bigger, I started thinking, well, how do I capture the immenseness of this project that I've had? how do you capture painting sound in something that you can't put your finger on? How do you capture all of the memories and experiences and places that I've had during this time into one work? And it needed to be that big for me to actually be able to express it. So the canvas happened to be there, and people are going, why don't you just cut it? And then it became the ultimate challenge, which is I'm not going to cut it. I'm actually going to paint a 22-meter long work. So
Yeah. And did that make more sense to you with your thinking? Did it fit better
yeah,
than breaking it up?
yeah, yeah. And I wanted it to be continuous. I didn't want to do it in sections. I had seen Monet's work in the Tuileries, which was done in sections. Um, and my work is not like Monet's, believe me, but when you sit there and you have this sense of the peripheral vision of the work in its circular fashion, ex that's the experience I want people to have with my work, which is they can actually stand in the work and not see anything outside of it. And that's what I want for it as well, which is I've had this tremendous experience over 3 years or 3.5 years of being involved in something that has blocked out everything else pretty much, other than family and things like that, for this period of time. So it's expressing time, it's expressing experience, it's expressing immenseness, which reduces us to virtually nothing. So ecologically, we are just nothing. There's a book called The Planet in a Pebble, which I often relate to, which is we're a tiny speck in the cosmos of everything that's ever been. So when you're thinking about global politics and wars and everything that's going on, we are just nothing. So
Yeah.
all this painting can do is help us be human, looking at something that hopefully takes people on a bit of a journey, really.
Mm. Oh my gosh, I can't wait to see it. I'm definitely coming to that opening. Wouldn't miss it.
Great.
And your actual thesis, so the thesis you've written
Mm.
and the work that you've made, is the written part kind of explaining the visual part?
Yeah, it is to an extent. It does talk about more than maybe might express visually. I came across a concept called world bending, which I really liked, and it's normally used within a gaming digital culture. But an academic called Pete Reeve wrote this book about the importance of aesthetics. And so I've pinched his concept of world bending and I've brought it into my work because working with the media I do and with the ideas, they are bending worlds within worlds. So I talk about that within the context of worlds within worlds, these nested ontologies of where um, I didn't go too far down this, but existentialism captured me for a while and then it just got way too difficult to deal with. So I pulled myself back out of that rabbit hole into thinking about the surface, but also what's beneath the surface. So how do you then talk about that in a theoretical way? So talk about that from a number of perspectives. And one of the academics I've really enjoyed following is Tim Ingold. You probably heard about him, but Tim Ingold talks about aesthetics and the importance of touch and importance of drawing to us as humans. So for me, my work is very haptic. It's very textural and it is almost an antidote. And I write about this not so much directly, but indirectly. It's an antidote to our digital culture, but it's also an antidote to the world that I spent in corporate, which was nearly 30 years sitting behind a screen. So I really, really embrace the touch and how that connects us back with how we are as humans and therefore in painting. So I talk a lot about those sorts of things. I talk a lot about time, how time matters and how it matters within the scope of painting to take time to look at place, to look at the painting, to actually work with how the media works with time as well, and the materials and how they behave and temperature. So, depending on temperatures in the studio, work can behave differently. It has its own behaviors. I like its unpredictability. So I talk a lot about those sorts of things as well.
Wow, so fascinating. And then from a sort of practical commercial point of view, how do you sell your work? And I know you do have your work in tertiary institutions
Mm.
and places like that. Do you feel like your work belongs in the galleries, in the museums, in the institutions? Is it also accessible work that, collectors down the road might want on their wall?
Possibly both. I do have a gallery show coming up, of which I'm a guest artist at Sanderson, opening at the end of May with my friend Sarah Treadwell. Um, that and with Mickey Smith actually, who was one of the artists that we had at our studios down here in Victoria Road. And Mickey's work is really beautifully conceptual. She researches libraries, and Sarah and I have shown work together regularly before. And Sarah's work speaks to oceans and sea, and mine speaks to place, but also in the context of this show, we've called it sea texts. So
Mm,
in a visual language. And it's alluding to Mickey's work that she's doing as well. But accessibility is an interesting one. I love to work large now, but that makes the work less accessible than if it was being shown in institutions or museums. I would love for it to be shown in those spaces because I believe that it has stories to tell that we need to hear, particularly at the moment with what's happening with world politics. I believe it has an ecological story that can be told with it as well. It's got a number of ways that the stories can actually be told, and that's been quite hard writing the supporting documentation for this exhibition, actually. But I do work small as well. I work with, little tiny light boxes, sort of about that big, and I now have the work in front of those so that glowing light can come through. But I'm also working with fitted light boxes now too, so to allow that waxiness, that beautiful glow from the wax. So, yeah, it could be accessible to domestic or to galleries,
mm,
I guess we'll wait and see. I have
yeah,
sold quite a bit of work, but they're large, and that means that they're, um, I guess, in the realm of people that actually have wall space,
yeah,
whether it's
yeah.
a gallery or whether it's a home.
And a lot of your big works in particular take so long to make, don't they?
Mm,
Yeah. And
mm.
your website serves as a bit of a living portfolio rather than just a shop front, as you say, although the works are available for purchase. So is the website one of the ways that you communicate the ideas and the thinking behind your work? And how else do you communicate what you're thinking?
So the website, yes, and I'm way behind updating it. So that's a job for this week, but
I think you've got a
literally,
good excuse there.
literally have been buried in PhD land.
Yeah.
That is one way. Um, I do I do communicate by applying for exhibitions as well. And in that application process, you are aware that people are seeing your work and reading about it through that process, even if it's not accepted. The other methods of communication really are Facebook and Instagram, but I do give quite a lot of public talks. So I've got an exhibition coming up at the Angela Morton Room in the Takapuna Library, which is opening on the 4th of April. And they have asked for me to give public talks through the Friends of the Library there, which I'll be doing. And I'm also doing a Pecha Kucha couple of evenings at the end of May here in Devonport with the theme of our Devonport.
Beautiful.
Yeah, and then gallery talks as well, quite often. So yeah,
Yeah. And are you actually represented by a gallery?
no.
Is that something that you're feeling
Oh,
like
I'd
you
love to
need?
be.
Yeah,
Every
okay.
artist,
There you
yeah.
go, gallerists. I can actually see you working with Scott Laurie, who's working out of Edinburgh.
I love Scott. Yeah, I think he's a huge loss to Aotearoa New Zealand, but he is bringing New Zealand artists over, which is great. But yeah, I love him as a person, as a
Yeah.
gallerist, and also what he does for artists as well.
Yeah, me too. And I
Mm.
do think you should have a chat with Scott about having a show in his gallery.
You know what you're told when you go through the university system? Never reach out to gallerists.
Really?
Yeah.
That's interesting. I'm sure Scott wouldn't mind. He'd love it. There you go, Scott, if you're listening, which he does listen. So,
Oh, thank you. Thank you for that push.
no, for sure. I can see a really nice synergy actually.
Mm.
Yeah. And so how do you actually afford to do all this kind of work? I mean, how does it happen?
I really had the full use of the scholarship that AUT provided, and I'm so grateful for that because without that, I couldn't have done the research that I've done. My practice would look entirely different. It would be more domestically focused, whereas I've been able to take a leap into an international context, both in Ireland and in Iceland, but also through the connections with the other residents, in residencies. From here on in, gosh, I'd like to sell more work, to keep myself going as a full-time artist, but it's unlikely. So yeah, I am looking at the moment for work part-time because I want to protect my practice, and you
Mm,
get tired when you're working. So
yeah.
I want to keep my energy levels up for my practice if I'm taking on work as well.
Yeah. And do
Mm.
you feel like you need that little bit of a sort of breathing space for your art practice and that the part-time work could provide that?
Yeah, I haven't actually had to work part-time for 3 years. So introducing that, well, in fact, I haven't worked for over 12 years. I have painted and I've been lucky to be supported by my husband in that. But yeah, to continue,
Painting is working.
it is working. Yeah, it just doesn't pay the bills. But I am
No.
applying for funding, as everyone does. But it's a tight market. It's tight for funding. It's tight all round. So yeah,
Mm,
yeah.
that's really, really tough.
I do provide mentoring. And I'm going to introduce more one-on-one mentoring now that I've got the PhD out of the way. And I do continue to teach workshops. And I'm now co-teaching a little plug for this actually, a workshop called Out of the Box. And it's with myself doing painting, Steve Bolton doing drawing, Celia Walker, master printmaker, doing printmaking. And then we're going to pull it all together on day 4. So it's a 4-day workshop with 1 day each dedicated to each of the disciplines. Mine is not cold wax painting, it's just general painting. And we're getting a lot of interest in that. And then the other thing I'm going to be introducing, which I know there's a demand for, is what I called Find Your Visual Voice workshops. I want to encourage them to answer some questions, to think more deeply. So taking them along the kind of path I've been on, but where they don't have to go into an academic institution to actually have the same kind of questioning and support.
Mm,
And then every year I teach at Nelson Art and You, which is a 5-day workshop. That's a fabulous, fabulous workshop. So it's myself doing painting, cold wax. I'm actually going to be teaching concurrently. So I'm going to do a masterclass and have an intro class running at the same time. Those workshops are getting booked up already, but I'll have a helper with me for those two. So yeah, I really encourage people to look out for that because immersing yourself for 5 days is a really special way to fill your cup, your creative.
yeah. Oh
Yeah.
my God, I'm just like tick, 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 tick. Everything you're talking about, like, yes, I want to do that. I'd love to do that. I'm in a transition time myself, and I feel like I need a mentor to kind of help me into more of a full-time practice. I really
Right,
do. And
right.
just listening to you talking it's so inspiring. And so um, for me, it just makes me see what I need. Do you know
That's
what I mean?
interesting. I love that. Thank you.
No, I really do. And I think, people listening will feel the same. And if I can put links of all these opportunities that you're involved with at the bottom of your blog post, which is on my website. But I feel like you have got so much to offer. You've been through so much, artistically and, academically. And you've got so much to give to artists at all stages of their careers, which I think is an incredibly valuable resource. And I hope that your part-time work is just going to be what you can bring to other artists, the teaching and the collaborating and the projects. And, I feel like that's where you need to be. And you're really contributing something incredible. So, yeah, I'm very serious about joining you with some of those
Oh,
workshops.
I'm glad to hear that. I really am glad. And that's what I want for people is to have what I have been given, the gift of what I've been given in the last 12 to 13 years. I mean, I have taught workshops where, especially in the longer ones, where people have been through so much trauma in their lives. And to give themselves that gift of making, doesn't matter whether it's cold wax or something else, but just have time creating is just so healing. But it does open up things as well that
Yeah.
at times need confronting.
Yeah, I can see that. And
Mm.
so once you've got your show, your PhD show out the way and you've got your other exhibitions coming up,
Mm.
where do you see your practice going from there?
Well, I'm doing another exhibition at the end of the year, which is an actual collaboration with Beatrice Carlson. And Beatrice is this most incredible artist, multi-dimensional artist. You know her
Yeah.
well.
Yes, she's amazing.
Yeah, she is. So she and I are aiming for a residency in October, followed by an exhibition at Satellite 2 in Te Hau Kapua in November. But this is a different way of us working. So I'm going to be using her materials in my practice, and she's using my materials in her practice. And she's actually doing that right now and posting up on Instagram.
I love the little brooches with it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. And
with
they are
parts of your paintings.
yeah, yeah. So I'm cutting pieces and she's taking them and working with them in this most like incredibly wide, broad way and thinking about adornment and how we perceive not just ourselves, our artwork, our jewelry, which of course is, where a lot of her focus is, but she's looking at senses and how those senses can come into both our practices as well. Um, I'm working with her at the moment on the ideas, but I haven't been able to execute them yet just because of sheer timing. But that's my focus really for after, my show.
Mm,
And yeah, she's just she's awesome. She's
how incredible.
yeah.
And I have interviewed Beatrice on the podcast, I think quite a long time ago.
Right,
Right, and I think maybe the first year or two of the podcast. And
right.
yeah, the way she uses materials and I love the way her practice kind of starts with materiality
Mm,
and grows from there, or the ideas come from that.
mm,
It's just,
mm.
and working with another artist just seems such a beautiful collaboration.
Yeah, it really is. And of course, I love doing the big collaborations as well. So, I mean, I have put proposals forward to go back to Ireland to run collaborations there. There's a potential opportunity, but that's June, July. But I really like collaborating. I really like being there with people, seeing them doing things and surprising themselves and confronting their ideas of why you shouldn't, bathe the canvas. And it's just fabulous.
Yeah, and you do
That's
it so well, and you've had
well,
such incredible experiences.
well, yeah, I just really enjoy it. And, it does draw on my corporate background, my, kind of project management, program management makes me organized. You've got to inspire people to want to actually get to the end of a program or a project. So a lot of those things I do draw on.
Yeah.
That's all I am, is I'm the culmination of everything that's gone before.
Yeah, exactly. And none of it was a waste of time.
No, no, not at all. No.
Not at all. Yeah.
Mm,
So with a process like that, all the way back to your Bachelor of Fine Arts through your masters and your thesis, it's a big, big, big journey, which many people would not actually manage to get through, I imagine. Did you have any, what were your challenges through the PhD, and did you have any moments of thinking you might have to give up?
yeah, well, actually, even doing the BFA, when someone tells you you're not a competent artist and you're just a beginner, and you are like, oh my God, I used to be competent when in my previous job, and now I'm not competent. What am I going to do about it? Really easy to give up. But there's a kind of gnarly part to me too, which was if I don't do this, I'm not going back into that corporate world. I can't do it anymore. What am I going to do? I just have to keep going. And yeah, that was quite tough in that first 2 years of the BFA. The master's was much more well, because it was part-time too, it was a much more joyful time. And it was again the antidote to my brother having cancer. So I was able to actually indulge myself with masters in a way that I didn't really have to do too much until that final year of writing, because the writing was always going to be the thing that was going to challenge me. I really didn't feel academic at all, and I still don't, to be honest.
Really?
But then the PhD was like, okay, well, I'm just going to do it. And with the the encouragement of having a scholarship and AUT support and my supervision was just the thing that really kept me going. But there's a really known phenomenon with PhDs that when you're about halfway through is about the time that you consider, why are you doing it? Is there any point? Got to give up. Mine was also overlaid, particularly last year coming back from the Burren. I did quite a lot of writing over there. And my beautiful friends, Jean and Anne, looked at the writing I was doing and provided feedback while I was there as well. But coming back, I just couldn't continue. I didn't know what to do. I could paint, but I couldn't write. And I
Really?
remember having the conversation with my supervisors and that I couldn't situate the focus for my writing. And I needed the process of grieving what I had just experienced. And I needed to go through that process to get to the other side. So we agreed that I wouldn't see them for 3 months and that I would just paint. And that's what we did. But then in the November, it was like, actually, you need to pull finger here and pull it all together. And I really want to thank Sarah Treadwell as well here, because she and I show work together, but she's got a very academic background and supervision as well. And she's just the most amazingly generous woman who sat down and went through my thesis before it went to the copy editor and gave me, incredible feedback. Yeah, I've had a lot of help on the way. And I think for anyone going through a PhD, if you can surround yourself with the kind of help that I've had, which is family, friends, a supportive partner, like what they go through is absolute hell. When you're going through those moments of, I can't do this, therefore I'm shit, therefore my painting's shit, therefore the world is shit, they just chug along behind you and just keep pushing and saying, hey, it's okay, you're okay, I still love you. Yeah, John is unbelievably the best thing that has ever happened to me in terms of me going on this journey.
Mm.
It really does push you to question everything about who you are and where you fit in life and what it means to you. So, yeah, your supervisors are incredibly important. And as I say, I've just been blessed with them.
Mm.
So, yeah, it's kind of like when I used to think about program management, the things that made a successful program were very much the things that occurred to me in thinking about the PhD as a program as well. Sponsors, funding, support, like way and beyond what you think you need, clear objective. And that was the thing that I hadn't realized really going into the PhD that was going to come to me after that 18-month period, was actually being really clear and making decisions about what that approach would be, even though there were so many other ideas. Yeah, and for me anyway, an end date to work towards so that I could actually go. At times I was like, I want this out of the way. I've just got to get it out of the way. And that's my date. And I aimed for that date and I met that date. And I'm really pleased that I did.
Yeah. You
Yeah.
must have a huge sense of satisfaction.
Oh, yeah. The only problem I've still got I've still got the installation. I've got the meeting with the examiners. The process with the creative practice PhD is quite not onerous, but it's more than a normal PhD. So you get to this point, you have this meeting with examiners. It's convened by the Graduate Research School. They go away and they have 6 weeks in which to write their reports. And
Wow.
then you have 1 week in which to read them and prepare for your oral defence. So,
Really? And
yeah,
defense is that only required if they're not sure
No,
about some things or?
it's for everyone. So they question every bit of writing you've done, your thinking, your logic, how your thesis relates to the work, how the work relates to what you're
Wow,
writing about. So yeah,
that's
and that's the one
huge.
I'm nervous about, really nervous.
Yeah, but I think you're very eloquent and very good at talking through your thinking, so I'm sure you'll be absolutely fine.
Oh well, we'll see.
It's a big process, though, isn't it? It's much bigger than I thought.
Like I've had people come in who are friends who've done science PhDs and they go, oh my God, this is so much harder because you have to
Mm,
actually go out to go in. You don't have really a clear research focus until you've actually gone in. You're not part of another research group, like doing PhDs together to kind of meet some research outcome. It's very free and flowing.
yeah.
Yeah, and for
And-
somebody who has constant ideas, that was quite a challenge, was to just go, okay, right, this is what it is.
Yeah, I can imagine. And then what do you expect will happen with the work that you've made and the thesis you've written?
Oh, wouldn't it be lovely if someone came along and said, we'd like to show this in an art gallery or a museum or something? That would be wonderful. But I'm not holding my breath.
Okay. Well,
I live
hopefully
in
that
hope.
happens.
Yeah.
But you've got to be able to share it somehow, so you'll have to sort of think about that, you know. It's just such a shame, isn't it, that you create this incredible body of work and then you kind of have to wait for other people to come to you. It's a shame that you can't just do
Mm,
what you want to do with
mm.
it.
Yeah, and I'm not working in the university system. And I think if I was, then that might actually be easier. Um, and I could do some teaching or something like that, I hope. But yeah, I'm not part of the system. I'm
Mm.
outside it. Yeah.
Yeah, which is another interesting thing to talk about, but that's a whole other podcast episode. But yeah, oh well, Janet, honestly, I just feel completely inspired by talking to you, and I just think you're incredible, and what you've achieved is just so impressive, and cannot wait to see this incredible work. But yeah, it's been an interesting episode, I think, and I'm sure a lot of the listeners will have really loved just digging quite deep into that conceptual thinking and even the PhD process, I think, is quite interesting. It's not something that I was that familiar with. So thank
Mm.
you so much for trusting me to help tell your story and for being on Creative Connections.
Oh, look, Mandy, you've asked some incredibly well thought out questions that have allowed me to respond. So I really do thank you for this and for, putting that effort in as well. It's amazing what you're doing for artists. So yeah, ka kite.